Please note, this episode contains discussions of situations or themes that some may find emotionally distressing.
You're with your family, you're celebrating, things are fantastic, but then suddenly one night they weren't. What happened?
It's like being hit by a train. They were charging me with espionage, assembly and collusion to overthrow the Islamic Republic. And he said, "You're going to be hung." Somebody else comes to my other ear and says, "The only way you can stop this is that you confess to being a CIA spy." And there is about 20 guys with their faces covered, but they all had an AK-47 in their hand, and they were pointing at me and at the car. And within seconds, I felt the cold tarmac on my cheek. The country of your birth for 5.5 years has called you a criminal, and you arrived to the country that you had chosen to become a citizen of, and at 4:30 in the morning, there's about 150 American servicemen, officers, who tell you, "Welcome home, sir."
In this episode of the SuperPower Podcast, I'm joined by Emad Shargi, a businessman, entrepreneur, and survivor of extraordinary circumstances. Emad built a successful career, co-founding and leading multiple companies, traveling the world, and raising a family along the way. But in 2018, everything changed. During a holiday visit to his birth country of Iran, Emad was arrested by agents of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Wrongfully accused of espionage and conspiracy to overthrow the Iranian government, he endured 2 arrests, near execution, a prison fire, and repeated beatings. Experiences that no human being should ever face. He spent 5 years in Iranian prisons before his release in a historic deal that brought him home to the United States in September 2023. Today, Emad is focused on rebuilding his life, spending time with his family, and embracing life's simple joys. Join us as we explore his remarkable journey, from thriving entrepreneur to wrongful detainee, and the resilience, the perspective, and the hope that he carried with him through it all. Emad, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Now, I've watched your journey and, incredibly inspiring, and it's really, really an honor to have you here. And I know there's lots I want to discuss today. But as I often start on the podcast, I want to go back, and I want to go back right back to the beginning of your life, because what is the earliest memory that you have in Emad's life?
The earliest memory I have, I think I must have been 2 years old, climbing up stairs of our first house in Tehran. I remember being picked up by my mother and taken downstairs. And so that's the first memory that I have, is at the age of 2. We lived in that house, for another 4 or 5 months. And then we moved to a larger house that was in northern Tehran. And I remember my childhood quite vividly, actually.
Okay. And what was that childhood like then, as a young boy?
I felt always fortunate to live, have been born in a family that was stable. I was basically the only child for the first 7 years, and then my sister Neda was born, and then I sort of went off to boarding school at the age of 13.
Mm-hmm.
So it was always like having 2 families,
Yeah.
But life was wonderful. This was pre-revolution Iran. Every day things seemed better than yesterday.
Okay.
My father was an industrialist, and it was a very comfortable life.
But then I know in Tehran, obviously the capital of Iran, you went to a private school, which to many of us, that sounds, very special. But what was life like at the private school in Tehran?
I don't think the Iranian education system was set up to be compassionate with all the students. So even in a private school, we had like 35 kids in the class. So you had, 7 or 8 of them who were really bright, who sat in the front. Then there was the rest of us in the middle, me included. And then in the back, there were like 7 or 8 guys who were repeating the same grade. Um, if you understood the lessons, you did fantastic and you had no problem. But I thought it was a cruel education system.
Okay.
There was a lot of physical abuse that went on. I mean, you didn't do your homework. You were sent in front of the class, you and like 5 other people, and the teacher would walk up and slap you across the face. You know, I remember at the age of, 7, being in 1st or 2nd grade, in Iranian schools, we had teachers who were not actually, their job was not to teach. They were called nazims. They were sort of like enforcer of rules. And imagine, 1st grader fighting in the yard, and they would come up and they would put a pencil between your fingers and they would press them until you would cry.
Oh.
And I never understood what was the purpose of all of this cruelty. But in a way, I'm actually quite happy that in a very odd way, I went through that until I was 13. I think that really prepared me for later on being in jail in Iran.
Yeah. And so you get to 13, clearly there's violence in the system that has clearly not left that system today. You're a 13-year-old boy, you've become a teenager, it's 1978.
Correct.
A year before the revolution, a lot of changes coming in Iran. You leave. Just talk to me about that exit out of Iran, because that's a lot to take on at 13.
Yeah. Well, my parents were kind enough to send me to summer schools since I was 9 years old. And these were summer programs in England, mostly, anywhere from 3 weeks to 5 weeks. So since the age of 9, I had gotten used to the idea of going away. And the plan for me was always to go to boarding school. So when I was 13, August of 1978, I was sent, and I went to a wonderful boarding school here in the UK, in Somerset, called Millfield. And I really had 4 of the best years of my life there.
No violence.
They treated me like a human being. There were rules, of course, but there was no violence. The teachers were kind. I remember one of the first weeks I was there, I had difficulty understanding a mathematical problem. And my teacher called me afterwards, after the class ended, and I thought, oh my God, they're going to do something. And she was like, Emad, I see you don't understand this concept. Don't worry about it. And she signed me up. She actually walked me out that afternoon to the audiovisual, that's what we called it at the time, center. And they put me in front of a monitor, and they showed me people playing snooker. And that's how I was starting to get the hang of the angles and all of those things. So it was a completely different way of teaching.
Wow.
And then the school gave you responsibilities. And as you grew up, I became like a monitor, then a prefect, then a house prefect, then a school prefect. So you had responsibility, and they expected you to deliver on those. And it was a lovely time. It was a beautiful part of the world.
And you were still going back to Tehran every now and again?
No.
Okay.
The last time I went to Tehran was the Christmas of 78, 79. Because it was martial law at the time. Things were not going well. And that was the last trip I took for many, many years.
Wow. Then after your education, as the years go on, you eventually went to the USA.
Correct.
Now, you go to the USA, and I know I'm jumping a little bit here, but I get to 1992, and you're obviously a businessman. You set up your first business, and that launches till 2008.
That's correct, yeah.
But what's really fascinating, I know that you've been in the business of chemicals to private equity, aviation, hypermarkets in Iraq, dairy businesses in Greece.
That's right.
Do you just love variation?
I was very fortunate that I had friends that I made at boarding school. And these friends are my friends to this day. Some of those businesses that you mentioned came in the latter part of my career. Um, One of my best friends had set up a private equity firm in Abu Dhabi, and they invested in different verticals around the world. So automotive was one, uh, dairy was another one, aviation was one. And I joined them in 2008 as the CEO of the aviation section. And then slowly I got pulled into other activities. So we had a import and sale of automotive in Finland, dairy business in Greece, hypermarket in northern Iraq. It was fun. It was really lovely. My partners were just wonderful people. All of them had long business experiences around the world.
And how would you have described Imad as the businessman then? So we're going pre-2018 now, like you being in business. From the outside in, how would somebody describe you when you're doing business?
Well, my first business that I started myself in early 90s, it was basically a one-man show. I represented U.S. chemical companies, and some of these companies, their export departments, they were not in the business of giving one-on-one service to clients in the Middle East. So what I would do is I would go there and I would find these clients. I would tell them, what material are you purchasing, from where? If I can give you a concierge service, would you give me one chance? And that's how I did it. I literally would go to cities like Jeddah and Riyadh, hire a car in the morning, go to the industrial park, and I would drive around, and anytime I saw a factory that had a silo, that I knew that that's where they kept petrochemical byproducts, I would knock on the door. And I would say, I want to see your manager or your owner. 95% of the time, I would get to see them. So I would, ship 1,000 tons of material to them, 1,500 tons, 2,000 tons. They would open letters of credit for me, and I had open accounts with my American producers.
Got it.
It was fantastic. No reporting. It was no PowerPoints. It was purely old-fashioned business.
But from the outside in, people might be listening and think, wow, so born in Tehran, I had the opportunity to go to boarding school in the UK. That costs money. We know that. Many people might, say, well, you've got a comfort blanket from your parents, but you clearly also had this work ethic. Is that in the Iranian culture already, that you stand on your own 2 feet, or is that just you?
No, I think it's pretty much expected.
Okay.
My father told me, I'm not going to leave you any money when I die. I'll spend it on you while you're growing up. So when I ended up going to Millfield in 1978, Millfield was in the Guinness Book of World Record as the most expensive public school in the world. Right. So that was a gift my parents gave me. And while I was going through it, I knew that that was a gift.
Okay.
Yeah.
They made you aware of that as well.
I don't think they made it aware. In the environment that I was, I could sense it. The people who were in that school with me, I could sense that I was a very fortunate human being to have the luxury of being there.
And speaking of people that you met, I guess as the years go on, you then met your wife today.
That's right.
Bahare. Now, tell me a little bit about your wife, and then obviously going on, you started your own family.
I keep going back to this word that I'm a very fortunate person. I was very lucky to have met her. I never thought that I would marry an Iranian girl, and I met her in August of 1988, and we got married 3 months later. And I think definitely she's the better part of this union. She's a kind, compassionate, caring human being. She's a poet. She does poetry therapy. Um, she's she's definitely any man's dream wife.
Oh. And so you're about 24-ish years
24,
old,
yes.
24, you get married, you then go on to have two lovely daughters. All right, so how old were you when you had your daughters then, as they came
We
along?
waited 7 years.
Okay,
So
your
Bahar and
30s.
I did a lot of traveling around the
Wow.
world. You know, it was wonderful. We had a whole life, and then we had our girls,
Yeah.
and that was beautiful. I mean, our eldest one was born in '96, and then 2 years later, the youngest one was born.
Wow. Now, as we go through, so into the 2000s, the girls are at home, growing up. You're involved with the various businesses, the private equity firm. But then, kind of moving on ever so slightly, you've always had, I guess, some connection to Iran, is where you were born. Obviously, the 70s, 80s, difficult to travel there. Did you start to travel there more frequently?
I went back to Iran once or twice in the '90s, late '90s, for 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
And then in 2008, Bahar and I and the girls, we moved from Washington to Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. And we lived there for 8 years. It was wonderful. During the latter part of that period, there were negotiations with Iran. The JCPOA was happening. There was a lot of excitement that Iran was going to open up once more. And there were opportunities for travel, for tourism, for business. So in 2014, 15, we went back a couple of times as a family to visit historical sites. And it was really wonderful. I even went back a couple of times with my friends in Abu Dhabi, Americans, Germans. We had like a boys' week, and we went to these sites. And I was always so proud when I would take them back to the airport to drop them off, because they had a good time. The Iranian people were so sweet, and I always thought, this is the best thing I could do for the country of my birth. That people come and they realize that the Iranian people are very sweet and hospitable.
And so that's, as you say, 2016. And
Correct.
then up to, so we're early 2018, very early on, before you then take a trip to Iran. Life was all good? The girls are growing older?
Life was good.
Great.
My eldest daughter was at University of St. Andrews in Scotland. My youngest daughter was going to American University. My wife and I, we spent about 6-7 months in Iran because we were going to move from Abu Dhabi back to Washington. And there was going to take 2 to 3 months for all our furniture to get back. So we used that time to travel through Iran.
Wow.
And while this was happening, I got an offer to work for a Dutch venture capital company that invested in startups in the Middle East. So beginning of 2018, Bahar and I, my wife and I, we moved to Amsterdam and rented an apartment, and they started looking to buy an apartment. So it was great.
Wow. And then that same year, obviously the Iranian New Year was coming up, and you decided, let's all go to Tehran. Because
That's right.
you'd been spending a lot of time there, you'd been showing friends around there, you felt safe, comfortable going there.
Yeah, I never had any problem.
But you go there, and then just tell me, because we can all relate to this, you're with your family, you're celebrating, things are fantastic, but then suddenly one night they weren't. What happened?
It's very hard to describe because it's like being hit by a train. And people who have traumas in life know what I'm talking about. Everything is going exactly like it's supposed to be. And then at 12:30 in the morning, you open your eyes and there are people filing into your bedroom. You turn on the light You have no idea what's going on. You have no idea who these people are. They're all wearing surgical masks. And this is before the pandemic. So it was very odd to see people with surgical masks. And a gentleman walks up to me. He says, "Is your name Emad Shargi?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "This is an arrest warrant for you and for your wife."
And you and Bahari, you literally just in bed, middle of the night.
Middle of the night.
And what happens next?
They ransacked the house. They took all our electronic equipment, books, passports, everything. I was supposed to fly out, I think, the day after to Amsterdam, back to work. They took everything. And then at around 2 a.m, they said that we're going to take you. And my wife, said, you can't take him. It was a foregone conclusion. I was going to be gone. So they took me out of that house that morning around 2 o'clock.
So you're taken out. You don't know what's now happening with your wife. Where
No.
are you taken? What?
I was taken to a halfway house where they took all my belongings. They registered me, and they took me to a cell. There was nobody in the cell. They took me in a cell, and the guy told me, "Get some sleep. It's going to be a long day for you tomorrow." And that's how that journey started. And then the next morning, they came and picked me up, and they blindfolded me. So I didn't know where I was. They took me out on the highway. They took the blindfolds off, and we were heading north of Tehran. We were heading towards our house. And I knew there's a turnoff. If they went straight, it meant that there was a mistake. I was going to go home. If they veered left, I knew where we were heading to. And we were heading to Evin prison. And then the blindfolds go on again.
So did you see whether you turned?
I saw where we turned. I remembered as a child the old Hilton Hotel, which is on your left-hand side, and about a mile up the road on the right-hand side. As a child, I remembered the gates of Evin prison. And it's very odd. Even as a child, when we drove by it, I always looked away. And somehow, 40 years later, 45 years later, I ended up going there.
So you now arrive at Evin prison, this place nobody ever wants to see or go inside. And then what happens next? You're still, I guess, confused. You don't know what on earth is going on.
They took the blindfolds off me and they took me inside the building. We went to somebody's office. He asked me a few questions. I'd been in the aviation business, so I had plenty of pictures in private jets, in its cockpits. He said, "Are you a pilot?" I said, "No." He said, "We know that you've entertained a lot of foreigners at home." And I was like, "Well, since when has that hospitality has become a crime in Iran?" He asks me to stand up, and then he reads me my charges. They were charging me with espionage and collusion, assembly and collusion to overthrow the Islamic Republic.
So you're sat there listening to this.
Yeah, the whole thing took about 3-4 minutes. Then I'm blindfolded once more, taken downstairs, put in the vehicle, and we drove for about 2 minutes within the Evin campus.
Okay.
And they took me to a facility that later on I found out it's called 2A. It belongs to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It's their intelligence agency's maximum security interrogation facility.
So you're in 2A. Just kind of paint a picture for us now. So what's happening in there? What are the conditions like? Where are you?
Well, they take you to a receiving room. You're asked to strip naked. They give you a blue pajama-like uniform that everybody there wears. They fingerprint you, photographs. They give you a plastic flip-flop, and they tell you that from now on, you don't have a name, and they give you a code. My code was 97010. And they blindfold you once more, and they walk you to where the cells are. And, you walk in, they open a cell door, and they throw you in. And this was a solitary confinement. No toilet, no sink, nothing. So there you go. You just sit there.
And so you're thrown in the cell. The last time you saw Bahara, your wife, was 2 a.m. before you kind of left the
That's
house.
right.
You don't know where she is.
I didn't know. I assumed that they had arrested her because the arrest warrant had both our names on it.
And so you're thrown in the cell. What happens next? How long do you stay in there? What?
I was there, I think, for another 4 or 5 hours before somebody opened the door. They threw the blindfold, my blindfolds inside. They said, "Put it on. You're going for interrogation." And that was the first night of interrogations. And they're very, very rough the first few weeks.
So what are they doing? Interrogation? Are they physically, harming?
Yes. That first night, I think I was used as a punching bag for a few hours. They slap you, they push you around, and they scream. I don't know how they do this, but they scream for hours. And then I remember they took me to a room and they put me on a chair, and all of this is blindfold. You don't see anything. And then things went really quiet, but I knew this was the calm before the storm. So all of a sudden, I feel these enormous hands lift me by my neck, and they drag me to another space. And I'm thrown onto a chair, and it's quiet again. But I sense people. I feel there are people about a meter or two behind me. And somebody from the back lifts the blindfolds over my eyes. And I'm trying to adjust to see what's going on. And I see I'm in a large room, bare, nothing in it. Looks like a morgue. And there's a partition a couple of meters from where I'm sitting. And slowly, I look, and there's green light emanating through there. And I can just make out the outline of a human being. The partition opens up, and there is a man with black beard sitting on an altar, flooded, bathed in green light. And he's holding a Quran in his hand, and he starts reciting a prayer, which most of us know. It's the prayer called your Ashhad. It's the prayer that people read before you die or after you've died. And between him and I was a hangman's noose. And somebody whispers in my ear, he says to me, "Do you understand what he's saying? Do you know this prayer?" I didn't answer. And he said, "You're going to be hung." And a few moments later, somebody else comes to my other ear and says, "The only way you can stop this is that you confess to being a CIA spy." So, it was so odd. Within 24 hours, I had gone from being a normal American to an American hostage. So I became very familiar with that news for the next few nights, because this thing went on for a good part of a week, 10 days.
Okay.
And you lose track of time because there's no way you can tell the time,
Day, night, you
Day
don't know,
and
you
night, you
can't
don't
see.
know. Your cell, the light is on all the time. The windows are covered by metal sheets with tiny little holes in them. So you can tell when it's daylight, but you don't know what time of day it is. So this went on for about 10, 12 days like this.
And so after day 12 then, what happens? Because eventually there is a slight turn of getting out of that prison.
Well, after 12 days, they took me out of solitary and they took me to what is known as a communal cell. And basically, it's a bit larger, but there are 10, 12 other prisoners in there. Each of you, your only possession is 3 blankets, a bottle of plastic bottle of water, and a toothbrush. And all of you, we all sleep on the floor, like cans, like sardines in a can, right next to each other. And this becomes your world. You're in that room 24 hours a day. They take you out either for interrogation, you're blindfolded again, or they take you out 10 minutes in the morning for fresh air, 10 minutes in the afternoon. You're again blindfolded. You leave with this group in this room, and you're brought back. And when you go out for fresh air, as I said, you're blindfolded and you can't even look up at the sky. You're told off. Your head has to be lowered. So these people become your family. And your bathroom is one of these old-fashioned hole in the ground. It's in that room. That acts as your shower, as your sink. So you become very familiar with people's habits. And what they have done is, there used to be a door to these bathrooms, but about 2 months before I was arrested, an Iranian Canadian professor supposedly committed suicide there. I've been in those cells. There's no way you can commit suicide by hanging. So they had cut the top part of the door and the bottom part of the door, so it was like a bar door. So you have no privacy. But
Yeah.
this becomes your life.
And then, because there's so much more I want to get into, but this was your life now. You've gone from solitary confinement, you've now gone into the cell with other people. But then there was a day when suddenly you find yourself on the outside. How?
8 months goes by. We are now in early December of 2018. And all of a sudden, at around 1:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, my cell door opens. They say 97010. I said yes. They said, collect all your stuff. Well, I didn't have much stuff. It was 3 blankets and, I thought they were just moving my room. But no, they took me and they gave me all my clothes back. And an hour and a half later, I find myself standing outside of Evin prison's large gray gates. So, literally, I went from being 007 in the morning to being Mr. Bean. There was no rhyme or reason why they had arrested me, and then how do you release an American spy? It doesn't make sense. Yeah. So my wife had managed to get me out on bail. For those 8 months, every day she had gone to Evin. She had gone to see the prosecutor, the judges, anybody she could see, she had gone and seen. I think she had worn them down finally. And I got bailed and I went home.
So you go home. Your wife, clearly at that time when you were taken to prison, she wasn't. She's been fighting your case as best
Correct.
she can. You're now at home. Wow, a breath of fresh air almost, but then you and your wife had to make a decision.
Yes. We got a call after about a month of somewhat normal life. We got a call from a friend of ours in California who she was crying hysterically. This was like 10 o'clock at night, Tehran time. And she said, I just watched a report that the IRGC had arrested both of you once more and you were in Evin prison. And we're like, no, we were sitting at home. We hung up and I told Bahar, I said, look, these people, they're unpredictable. They could, come through the house again tonight, and this time they can take both of us. Our daughters need one of their parents to be safe. There's no reason for you to be here. And thank goodness, she's a wise woman. She agreed. We went to bed that night. Next morning, we went and got a ticket for her, and she flew out that night back to America.
Because she had her passport, but
they had
you
returned.
Didn't.
Yes, they had returned her passports.
Yeah.
But mine, I was on a no-fly list, and I had no passport.
So Bahare leaves.
She leaves.
You're in Tehran, thinking you're free-ish, but as I understand, every week or every 2 weeks, you're now seeing the prosecutor.
Yes.
You're basically on house arrest.
Yeah. I mean, initially, it was every week, Saturday morning, which is the first day of the week in Iran, 8 a.m., I had to report. I would go there, show my face, and they would say, go home.
Okay.
Then it was every 2 weeks. So for all of 2019, I was doing this. And then sometimes I would get a call and they would tell me the prosecutor wants to see you. He has questions. So I would go to his office, and it's a miserable experience because you go back to Evin prison. You sit there with all these parents whose kids have been taken. People are crying. It's just a miserable experience. Then you go upstairs. I go to the prosecutor's office. He asks me questions, same sort of things that they had asked me over the 8 months. And sometimes he would, just for the hell of it, say, something, Emad? I think today I'm going to throw you back in jail. And I was like, why? And then an hour later, he would say, go home. There were other times they would call me, and I would go there at 8 in the morning. I would sit outside his office. And around 3:30, he would come out and say, oh, you're here, Emad. Go home. So I would go home. And honestly, I think those times were sometimes more difficult than actually being inside jail. Because once you're inside jail, you know what's happening, But not knowing what's going to happen to you from week to week, day to day, it's grueling. It's crushing.
And so you'd obviously been in the jail, you're out of the jail, but still they're playing all these mind games, which are absolutely terrible. You then appoint a lawyer, finally in 2019, because you have access outside the jail. Just tell us a little bit, because towards the end of 2019, you thought things might be looking brighter, but then your lawyer contacts you.
Yes. Well, at the end of 2019, this same prosecutor calls me to his office.
Okay.
And I remember the date, it was December 23rd, 2019, right before Christmas. I go to his office around 10:30 in the morning. He says, Emad, we are done with you. He says, the government has just dropped its case. And I was like, thank you very much, sir. Well, how would I know? He says, I'll give you a letter of acquittal right now. 5 minutes later, he gives me a letter that says, the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran has dropped all charges on espionage, assembly, and collusion. So all the stuff that they had charged me was finished. He actually tells me, he says, please forgive us for the trouble we have caused you. Go in peace.
Wow.
I was like, thank God this is done.
Yeah.
I go home, I call my family in the US, I say, guys, it's finished. My lawyer tells me, I'll get your passport in 2 weeks, you'll go home. About a month later, he calls me up one day, he says, I want you to go to the Revolutionary Court. Don't worry about it, just go there and sign some paper, you're done. I get in a car, I go to the Revolutionary Court. Branch 15 of the Revolutionary Court, a gentleman by the name of Judge Salavati presides at Branch 15. And most Iranians, I would say, know his name and know his face. He tells me to sit down and to read my indictment. And I was like, I'm sorry, sir, but the prosecutor has already exonerated me, has given me a letter of acquittal. He says, don't listen to them. Read what I've written for you. So with no lawyer present, he makes me read 5.5 pages of lies. I mean, they literally had come up with stuff that had no truth to them. And he makes me sign it. And then that's the start of 2020 for me. My file had been reopened. The prosecutor general had objected to his own top prosecutor decision.
And just so people know, that judge has a nickname, right?
Yes.
The hanging judge.
The hanging judge. The hanging judge, since he presided over Branch 15, which was, I think, in the mid-2000s, he's given out 1,600 years in prison sentences and over 100 death sentences.
And then speaking of sentences, so suddenly this letter of acquittal means nothing.
Nothing.
You're back in square one, even worse, and this time they give you a sentence.
Yeah, basically I went to his office twice during that whole year. The first time was when I told you he read, he told me to read the new indictment. The second time was in August. He told me, write your final defense. I just didn't know. My lawyer was not allowed in the room. He had to sit outside. And then, my lawyer kept telling me, don't worry, it's finished, it's finished. Come November of 2020, my lawyer calls me one day and says, I have bad news for you. I was like, what? He says, Salavati has given you 10 years and you have 20 days to appeal. There was no way I was going to appeal anything. By now, I knew I was in a country with a lawless government and a corrupt judiciary. I wasn't going to appeal this thing because I knew what the results would be.
So you now know what's coming next because you've already been inside that prison. Now, anybody listening might be thinking, gosh, if I was in that situation, I need to get out of there. But you've got no passport. You can't just leave. There's police all around. However, tell us about Rudy.
Rudy is my old friend. I've known 50 years. We met at a couple of summer schools in England, and then we ended up at Millfield together. And then later on, we had a couple of business ventures together in Russia and in the UAE. Unbeknownst to me, Rudy had already started preparation to get his friend out. And a few days after I was sentenced, I got a call from Rudy, who lives in Europe. He says, Emad, I want you to call somebody this morning. Here's his name. Here's his mobile number. Just do it. In my gut, I knew what was happening. But I thought I'll go meet this guy and he will tell me, okay, in 2 or 3 days, get ready, we're going to go. So I met that guy that afternoon at 1:00. He said, we are leaving now. So I didn't tell anybody. I had left my cell phone at the house because I didn't want, for me to be followed. So we left right away. That was also a bizarre feeling because I hadn't told anybody. Nobody knew where I was going. And he had bought us bus tickets and we were heading to the northwest of the country. We had a 10-hour bus ride ahead of us.
So you go, and I feel like there's so much more we could get into here, but this journey, which would have felt like a lifetime, you eventually get very, very close to the border. It's within sight, but then things don't go to plan.
It was going so well. And we get very close to the border. We had changed 3 different cars. And the last one we got in, that ride was very short, only took about a minute. We went through 2 curves on the road, and after the second one, I look up and I see several SUVs blocking the road. And initially, I thought it was a car accident, but I look up, and there's about 20 guys with their faces covered, some with rags, others with the Palestinian kafirs. But they all had an AK-47 in their hand, and they were pointing at me and at the car. And within seconds, I felt the cold tarmac on my cheek. They handcuffed my hands behind my back, and they wrapped my scarf around my eyes. This time I had been arrested by a field unit of the Ministry of Intelligence.
And so now, as I understand, they weren't necessarily looking for you. A lot was going on in Iran at that time. It was very bad luck, very unfortunate timing. And over a period of time of being an outpost, you then find yourself back in Evin prison.
Correct. Well, I spent another month in various prisons in the city of Urumia, all in solitary confinement, hellholes, just awful. And after 30 days, they fly me back to Tehran. We go straight from the airport to Judge Salavati's office, and he was delighted. He was like, "Your American spy friends are not going to let you be. I'm going to send you back to 2A." So from there, they drove me back to where I had left 2 years prior, and it was like Groundhog Day on steroid. It was like I was back in the same building, the same cells, the same interrogators. Everything was the same. And I ended up spending another 8 months there and interrogated once more for 400 hours.
Now, not to rush through those, because those months obviously felt like a lifetime, and then there's so much going on, but 2020, 21, 22, the pandemic's going on around the world. Your life is upside down in the middle of Evin prison. 2022 in Iran, many people will recall maybe on the news, because there was the killing of Mahsa Amini. Now, I know obviously people might recall her story. She wasn't wearing the hijab in the way that was expected. And the moral police,
That's right,
decided to beat her badly, and she later died in
their custody. Correct.
Meanwhile, in prison, uproar and uprising starts happening across Iran, but a fire breaks out.
Yeah, the political prisoners were not having any of this. I mean, they knew what was happening outside, and in solidarity with the people of Iran, one night they just broke out. They broke their our ward had 4 floors, and they would lock the corridor door. They broke out. They took everything they had, all their blankets. They went downstairs and they lit a big bonfire downstairs. And our ward had no emergency exit. It was just one entrance, one stairwell. And soon enough, the prison is surrounded by riot guards, and they were not holding back. They were firing with live ammo from the hills surrounding our ward, and they were firing tear gas canisters inside. It was a mess, and I really thought that would be my last night.
But what's interesting is obviously at this point, the Iranian authorities, they don't want want you to die because you're worth quite a bit of money.
That's right.
Tell us about that.
First of all, I have to thank one of my cellmates because he came to me and said, Emad, under no condition, leave this floor. Because if you go out, you'll be shot. Stay here.
Potentially choking to death because of the fumes.
He thought that I have a better chance of surviving. And they put the riot down at around 11:30. At around 11, I hear, a squadron running up the steps. And these were heavily armed IRGC intelligence agents who specifically had come to my ward to rescue me or their product. And they took me back to aid that night. But that night, a lot of people got very, very hurt in my ward. One of the last things I remember was looking out one of the windows, and there were about 250 political prisoners that had been stripped naked, and the riot guards were going at them with clubs.
And so that's happened, and I remember the story all around the world, obviously, and I know that's continued to try and drive some change today, although it's happening very slowly. There's now a price tag on you of around $2 billion. There's 2 other prisoners, so effectively the $6 billion that is up for negotiation. But throughout all of this, though, many people would react. We're only human. You remain calm. How do you do that?
I saw so much pain and misery. All I could do was keep it together. I knew I would be freed one day. But you get to see a lot of people suffering around you. It's really a shame. Bright, young, some geniuses who are behind bars. They should be out there working for their country, making it a better place. And for, silly reasons, somebody has written something on a wall, they get 7 years in prison.
And so how was it, though, for you to remain so calm? Was it the hope?
Yeah, at the beginning, when I was in solitary, I looked deep inside. All of us, I think, have a toolbox inside our spirits and our mind, filled with tools. We just have to figure out which one to use, which one to nurture. I mean, for me, it was, my integrity. It was optimism. It was empathy towards my fellow inmates. It was humility, putting arrogance and ego aside. I knew that with my humility, I could break through my interrogator's wall of power. And lastly, gratitude. I was grateful for every day. Even the night of the fire, I was so grateful that I was taken out, I was taken to safety. I mean, you can always look on the bright side of things.
And obviously in all of those moments, your wife has fled the country, you haven't spoken to your daughters, there's so much going on in your mind, but you start to be aware that you are this bargaining chip.
Yes.
Now, conversations behind the scenes had started to go on, and suddenly the media was aware, your face is everywhere, people are aware that you are in prison, your family, your friends are obviously over in DC, and and rallying for you. Eventually, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Just tell me about that when things turned.
On August 10th, 2023, by this time I had been moved to Ward 4 with my two fellow American hostages. I was with them for about 9 months, and that was the best 9 months. I was in a room with the two of them and about 8 other wonderful human beings. And August 10th, our name was called. We went downstairs. We were driven to the same prosecutor's office, who wrote down on a piece of paper for each of us that he was going to send us under guard to an unknown location until something was going to happen. So August 10th at around 3:30 in the afternoon, they call us downstairs again, and they put us in a bus, and we leave Evin for the last time. We are given some ankle bracelets that are trackers, and then with a couple of escort cars, they take us to a hotel in central Tehran, where we stayed for the next 40 days.
And so you're in the hotel for 40 days, and for people who don't know, that was a large amount of money, 6 billion that's being transferred.
That's right.
And there's a lot of currency conversions that could change markets quite dramatically if it wasn't converted slowly over 40 days. But again, whilst you're in a hotel room, this is now almost the dream compared to where you've been. You finally got a bathroom, a toilet. Now, I know there's so much behind this, but the 40 days go by. You eventually take that flight from Iran via London, and you land in the US.
That's right. Well, actually, they drove us to the airport, and there we were met by the Swiss ambassador to Tehran and the Qatari ambassador to Tehran. And I have to tell you, the Swiss ambassador to Tehran is one hell of a lady. She came to visit us every week while we were in that hotel. She's marvelous. We flew. The Qatari government was kind enough. They had sent an empty A321 to pick us up, and they flew us to Doha, where we were met by the U.S. ambassador to Doha and the American team that had come to pick us up. Ambassador Roger Carstens, a team from the FBI, doctors, nurses.
Wow. And then throughout all of this journey, you eventually land in the States, and I've seen the photo.
Yeah.
And so waiting for you, your wife is there. What was that moment like, stepping off that plane?
For me and one of my friends, it had taken 5.5 years each. For my other friend, it had taken 8 years. But it was, a joyous moment. I mean, not too many people in life will get to feel that. Mm-hmm. And then the country of your birth for 5.5 years has called you a criminal. And you arrive to the country that you had chosen to become a citizen of. And at 4:30 in the morning, there's about 150 American servicemen, officers, who tell you, "Welcome home, sir. It's an honor to be here with you."
And so you're then back home for the first time, safe. And now I know you speak very openly as a warning to, those Americans who are Iranian descent, not to go to Iran, not to go into the whole regime there. There's so much more that needs to change.
Exactly. This isn't particularly a bad time for any foreigner, either dual national, Iranian Americans, or just Americans, Brits, Europeans, French. Please do not go to Iran until things settle down. I gave a warning back in June. Since then, public record shows there have been 4 Iranian Americans that have been taken. So please heed the warning. Travel to other places in the world. Stay away from Iran for the time being.
And it's particularly important me sat here with you because throughout you being in prison, I know I got to know your wife. We had walks in Central Park together and spent a lot of time, and I felt the pain that she was going through. Your wife is a beautiful soul. She's taught me so much. I remember the first time I met her, she made me get a piece of paper. And I was in the middle of a busy day. I was like, what's going on here? She just made me pour my heart into this piece of paper. Very powerful exercises. You've been through so much the last few years. Do you think things happen for a reason?
Yeah, I think so. I think, again, I now feel I'm part of this very exclusive club that got to see something that not too many people get to see. I wouldn't wish it on my enemy, but you got to make the best of it. I walk a bit taller now. I feel that some of the sharp edges of my character have been polished. And I look at the world a bit differently.
And I think in all of this, just looking this, we could speak for hours, but when we talk about superpowers, I mean, you've already said it for me. The one thing that's, obviously there's integrity, empathy, all these words, but humility. I mean, you said that helped you understand, if you're with the prosecutors, whoever's trying to interrogate you, to stay humble. What does humility mean for you? Why is that important for people to practice more?
Life can be cruel. And, adversity will come our way. You just have to remember when you're high up on life, not to lose that moral high ground. Arrogance, comes with success. It comes with wealth. It comes with fame. I think the more you have of any of those things, you got to walk with your head a little bit more bent down. And look around, see, what's happening to other people around you.
Yeah. I think in our discussions, you've said that, we can take for granted some of the rights that we think we've got. We're sat here in the UK or in the US, but actually to be treated as a human being and to treat others.
Yes.
Is so key. Now, I know life today, you spend a lot of time home is the United States, which obviously holds a place close to your heart. I saw your daughters recently, wonderful humans. As we look ahead, 20, 30, 40 years ahead, when people say your name of Emad Shargi, what do you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered as somebody who went through hell and came out better.
Which is a powerful reminder that I think, anything we go through in life, you said something that is really important. You got to experience that emotion of coming off that plane.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing gratitude even in the darkest of moments, that you've got to experience more emotions than many people will, and you're still seeing it as a positive in some way.
I do. I really feel I'm blessed.
Yeah.
I'm blessed to be able to still sense it, feel it, appreciate it.
Yeah. And I think as we wrap up today, just a huge thank you for your time. And I know all those people who've supported you throughout the journey as well, those in the US, around the world, the Swiss ambassador.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who remain nameless. We don't know their faces. But boy, these guys and these ladies worked their tails off to get us home.
Wow.
At the State Department, at the White House, and even now, the new White House, they have brought back 50 people in the last 9 months.
Wow.
I think that deserves, a lot of gratitude to be given to them.
And I think a final thank you to your wife, because she brought us together. And she's a
Indeed.
wonderful soul, and I hope people can check her work out as well.
I hope so.
Behari as well. Thank you so much for your time. Look forward to supporting however I can in the future, and thanks for spreading.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Emad. Thank you so much for being part of the SuperPower Podcast community. Your support, following, liking, subscribing, commenting, it genuinely helps us grow and bring on some wonderful voices who inspire me so much, and I hope in turn inspire you when you're listening. If there is somebody you'd love to hear from, or if there's anything that's sparked a few ideas for you in your life, I always like to know in the comments or drop me a note directly. Your ideas shape this show more than you would ever know. Now, we've got some bold and exciting plans with new guests ahead, but with your support, we can take the podcast to greater heights. So if you've got friends, family, tell them all about the show. And if you haven't already, hit that follow button, subscribe, whether it's Spotify, YouTube, or wherever it is that you're listening. And if you're on your in-flight entertainment right now, remember to follow us when you land, or maybe you've got Wi-Fi in the sky, so you can give us a follow or subscribe right now. But thank you once again for listening. I'm so inspired with all the guests that I get to meet, and I look forward to the next episode. My name's Gian Power, and I'll see you in the next episode of the SuperPower Podcast.